And welcome back to Offside, BarcaFutbol's very own YouTube channel. Today, we continue our Hansi Flick mini-series with episode 2, guys. If you have missed episode 1, it will be on our channel, so please make sure to check it out.
Hansi Flick's been doing amazing, and we are doing this series. But the most interesting thing is how he has made this team click together and how many goals we are scoring. Somebody said we are scoring even more than we had MSN, and it's true. How is Flick managing that? Last week, we looked into verticality, and you saw Dom explain, and we presented some stats and so on. This week, we're going to talk about the offense and what Dom likes to call sustained pressure. So for more about sustained pressure, let's turn it back to Dom.
Flick is on fire. And yes, last time was verticality because that was, we felt at least a little bit of a misunderstood concept in Flick's philosophy. And today we'll tackle a similarly, let's call it vague concept of football in general, not just Hansi Flick's Barcelona, which is, as Dev alluded to, sustained pressure. So here we are with the first tactics board of the day. And yes, as we already mentioned, this week it will be all about sustained pressure. Now, what is sustained pressure after all? Now, people, when they hear the word sustained pressure, they generally think about defensive mechanisms. That's because of the word pressure. When you see word pressure or pressing, you think, okay, that's something off the ball. It's something that you do to disrupt the opposition's build-up play. And in one way, it might be, it might be something of a defensive mechanism, but it's mainly actually an in-possession aspect of football. Is actually the ability to contain the opposition inside the defensive third or even just their own half and not let them breathe, not give them the chance to actually exit the half efficiently and continue their attack. So it is a form of disrupting the buildup, of applying the pressure, but it's more of an attacking thing, something that you do in possession of the ball. So the main idea is to create this net around the opposition and then keep bombarding them with attack after attack. So wave after wave of attacking and not letting them exit their own half, not letting them breathe. And that's what we call it sustained pressure. In a way, you could think of it as pressing for sure, but it's pressing when you are in possession of the ball. So hopefully that kind of makes sense and clarifies what we actually mean when we say sustained pressure and why this week we're all about attacking tactics, even though we have the pressure and the words pressing in our titles and our topics of today's video. Now, how is Hansi Flick's sustained pressure so effective and how does he even do it? Now, the first thing we have to mention here is the profile distribution. And this is basically a trademark of Hansi Flick because, as we say, he knows how to play to these particular set of players as strings. He knows how to use them, how to make them tick, and how to maximize their repertoire, their profiles, right? So basically what Flick does is he also creates this net around the opposition. And it's fairly simple on paper. He creates the net around the opposition and he doesn't let them out. But it's all about which players are used in which areas of the pitch. Now, if the app lets me, I will put Rafinha on the inside area right here. No, now, you see that we have two distinct zones on the pitch just now. We have the outer ring, which will be this ring. I will show you right there. So this will be the outer ring of players right there. And then following that, we will also have the inner ring. And as we now know, Hansi Flick is very big on clarity of role. That means that everyone has to know what they are doing in every phase of play. And the same goes for the sustained pressure as well. In the outer ring, as you can see here, we have mainly defenders and distributors of the ball. So their task will be to get the ball in these areas right here and then transfer them or distribute them to the inner ring. So their main role is distribution and also sweep. When I say sweeping, I mean clearing the ball and making sure that the opposition cannot transition from defense into attack efficient. That will be the two most crucial roles the outer ring has. Now, the inner ring, again, on paper, very simple. They get the ball in between the lines. They are the pocket players. They're the players who can thrive in between the lines and the players that can be the most creative and most lethal in a team because their task will be to jeopardize the opposition's goal and score the goals or just create the chances that score the goals, right? Now, another thing that Hansi Flick has, and it's a luxury to have, is players that have hybrid roles. So those are players that can be in one of the rings, but can then transfer their profile efficiently to the other ring as well. Now, we talk primarily about Lamine Yamal, a bit about Dani Olmo, about Pedri, and also about Rafinha. Now, these players are in their respective rings right now, but we know that, for example, Lamine Yamal doesn't really stay out wide. He is a distributor from the right side. He can be, absolutely. But what he often does is he moves into the inside ring, and then over there, he can become that between the lines pocket player who can score the goals and create from this inner circle. Dani Olmo similarly can drop deeper into the back line. He can be a distributor from the outside, as we know he is, but he can also threaten the goal from these areas right here, as we know that he often does. Pedri is mostly the same thing. He can be a deep presence and a very efficient deep presence, but also a high presence if Flick wants him to be the edge of the area kind of player who shoots on goal or creates chances. Rafinha, as we know, starts out wide and then he can cut inside and be the off the ball runner and be closer to the goal and then threaten through his ball striking and movement and timing of action. Now, this in a nutshell is Flick's sustained pressure. It's very simple on paper because you have only two layers of the action of the pitch. In this phase of play, you have the distribution area over here, which is the outer ring, and then you have the inner ring, which is the in between the lines, pocket play, and then direct goal threat. And then Flick also has players who can be in and out of the rings depending on how their profiles function best. And these players like Lamine, Olmo, Pedri, and Rafinha have dual roles, and that makes their profile so valuable and so broad.
Very artistic diagram. As you guys can see, lots of circles and squares and triangles out there. So those who love tactical diagrams, they will love this video. Flick has, for whatever reason, employed a very central way of playing. And in this, what happens is if you see that inner ring of four people, which is causing a lot of overloads in that central zone of 14 kind of space that we love to occupy. And what Dom talked about, pocket plays, playing between the lines, it just becomes much more intimidating because in Flick's system, what happens, it's Alde and Kunde who basically underlap and then go up, right up to the flank. And the crosses that come through are coming from them. Lamine actually inverts inside. Rafinha actually plays like a 10, as Tom pointed out. So then you have 5 or 6 players crowding the box at all points of time consistently, and then those quick interplay of passes that happen, which really can overwhelm oppositions, which we have seen and is very good in unpacking low blocks. And we face a lot of low blocks in La Liga, right? Another thing, Getafe was another like a PhD in low blocks from Bordelas, and we struggled, but we also didn't have some players. But this diagram in itself and this tactical breakdown in the simplest manner possible that Tom has done, which I thought was brilliant, this shows stylistically and from a principal point of view what happens when a team has a clear vision of what they need to do on the pitch. And I think Flick's have been able to do that. And that's one of the biggest things that we can take away from Flick in the first 2 months of his tenure at the Camp Nou.
Absolutely. And before we close out this part of the analysis, Dev, I will mention 2 more aspects that kind of go hand in hand as efficient tools of sustained pressure. Number 1 is verticality. And who could have guessed it? Verticality is a big part of sustained pressure because you have this outside ring that we talked about. Of course, you have. And then this outside ring is still the verticality ring. If you remember our previous video, which was on Flick's verticality, we mentioned that verticality, that quickness, directness of play actually comes from the very defensive, like the first phase of play is the most vertical phase. Now, when you sustain the pressure, this becomes your first phase, right? This outer ring becomes the first phase. And it's paramount. It's very important that this outer ring remains vertical and quick. Because if all you do is just shuffle the ball from one side to the other very slowly, very laboriously at your own pace, what happens is the opposition can simply shift to that side of the pitch very slowly and just efficiently and not really put that much effort or pace into it. And then you suffer, right? Because you get that infamous U shape of death, right? When you just circulate the ball from one side to the other and you cannot penetrate the block. So tempo control is important in this phase of play. And that's why you need to have these distributors, Kubarsis, Casados, Inigos, Koundés, even Lamines on this outer ring because they can play quickly. They can be very incisive with their passing. They can break lines. They can access this middle third very quickly and efficiently. And that's how you sustain the pressure very well. And so far, this has been working for Flick, and props to him. We'll see if it keeps up, if it's sustainable or not. But so far, this has been a very good aspect of Flick's philosophy. And number 2, real quickly, is the counter pressing. Now, we will talk about pressing and pressing shapes and defensive mechanisms next week. So I will keep this part very short, very clear. Now, defensively, how does pressing or counter pressing specifically aid your sustained pressure? We said that to be able to sustain pressure, you always have to have the ball and you always have to be ready to attack with the next wave of action. To be able to dominate that, you have to dominate the off the ball aspect as well. So let's say this middle ring loses the ball. If you don't recover the ball immediately with the players that are right around it, for example, all these players have to collapse on the ball carrier, put a lot of pressure immediately on the area where the ball has been lost. And you can't do that, your momentum breaks. And then suddenly the players can have some space and time on the ball. They can breathe, they can reset, they can build up from their own third and then set up their attacks. Now, counter pressing prevents that. Counter pressing ensures that you can keep being the aggressor. You can keep being the dominant and proactive force in the game. And that's how you dominate all aspects of football on the pitch. But more on that next week. So this was just a little preview of what comes next. Dev, any closing thoughts before I stop the share and we move on to stats?
No, I think both go hand in hand. The out of position and in position. I think you've been saying this for a longest time, Dom, that one affects the other. And I think the last 2 seasons, one of the biggest problems that Barca had was its out of position was, let's just say, it was not as clean and as defined. I wouldn't say that Xavi didn't do any work. He probably tried. He did it the best that he could. But it seemed that the team was lost at times in understanding what they were supposed to do when they didn't have the ball. And the other thing that we could see is that even Xavi's point of view was that you should try and nick the ball as high up on the pitch as possible. But it had opened us to a lot of counters. And for whatever reason, we were still playing the high line, but we did concede a lot of counters. Now, this year, the offside trap has been really good. But beside that, I would say this concept of everybody falling in and trying to recover the ball, it's like a collective effort, have just been better executed in this season than it was in the last 2. And I think it's because of the fundamental principle with which Flick is coaching the setup and explaining the team and the members on what they need to do when certain incidents happen. And I think that's what we are seeing on the pitch. This is a highly aggressive attacking approach, right? And you can see the dominance in the penalty area, like 45 out of the 77, 60% almost, right? Were taken from inside. And which is what Dom talked about, right? When you have such an overload in that sort of 14, it becomes easier for the players to keep shot and it's a very small chances for goals. That's what we've been saying. And the attack has been also balanced. Yes, Lewandowski has scored about 7 and is a Pichichi, but you've got goals from Lamine, you've got goals from Pedri, you've got goals from Rafinha, you've got Dani Olmo. People chip in and at the right time. The things that haven't really kicked off would be probably the set pieces and the crossing or the cutbacks. I think we haven't seen that much in this team. But that just gives you that it's just been 2 months or 3 months with Blake. As we go ahead and this team trains even more and we get more players back and we add those little things into the mix, you'll be able to see a lot more that comes out. And my point of view is that this will only become even better, right?
The center is always the best position to be in when you want to shoot. And our best chances have come from these very high positions. And that is a very good sign of sustainability, of being able to sustain this approach and score at this rate for the remainder of the season. But also look at the number of shots from our 4 players in the attack. So Rafinha, Olmo, Lewandowski, they're all taking a lot of shots. And that's good to see because we need that. We need much more of that.
One indicator of how attacking a team is looking into how much dribbles they're doing, and not just how many dribbles, how many successful dribbles are they being able to pull off. So if you look at the data from that perspective, right, Lamine carries the threat on the wide right, and then you have a lot of players from the left, Rafinha and Balde, who carry that incentive into the left part of the pitch, and in the middle, you have players like Pedri and Olmo. So it's balanced. If you look into where the dribbles are actually happening, and that those quick interplay of passes that come through. And that's really very helpful in destabilizing defenses that we have seen. As we get more and more embedded into the season, we will see more of it. And then this brings us to what Dom even said a little bit earlier, which was that's relentless sustained pressure. What does that actually mean? It also means that you recover as many balls as possible as high up on the pitch. And you can see this map probably shows you very well how much recovery is in the final third. And this is in the opposition's final third, right? And look at the names: Pedri, Lewandowski, Lamine Yamal, Rafinha, Kunde. These are all attacking players who are putting pretty much of a solid defensive shift when it comes to A, stopping the counter, or B, even letting the opposition play out and create some sort of an attacking movement, right? And it's incredible because for the longest time when we had MSN, they were awesome, but none of them were defensive to an extent, right? And that had an impact on the rest of the team. With this lineup, which is that the offense takes a fairly significant load. Barcelona is known for stealing the ball high up the pitch and having that positional form of play. But it's just been refreshing to see and the efficacy with which it has been done.
Yes, absolutely. And I love that Pedri leads the line with 19 recoveries. And it just shows you that it's not about ability with Pedri has a great mind defensively and offensively, but it's just about limiting the space in which he has to operate. If you put Pedri in open spaces, he won't have 19 recoveries. He will struggle. He will possibly get injured. He'll get fatigued and so on. But if you limit that area to a little pocket that he's in charge of, he will be the best defender that you have on the team. And that shows in the data as well. The compactness brings you this, and it's great to see that.
Now let's look at the crosses that are coming through. We've not been the best at it. It's not a part of the game that Flick actually concentrates upon, but I also think that because we don't have the right players for it at this moment. Like with a hitman like Lewandowski, if you look at the number of crosses that have gone in, that's lesser, which means we're not taking advantage of his aerial threat or aerial prowess. And that's where I feel if we really get a solid left winger, like really elite level, I think that can aid to this game. I do not believe Lamine Yamal will be that player who crosses from the corner. I think he will be always be one of those who inverts in and then a prolific ball player plus goal scorer in the mold of Messi. Let's not call him Messi, but something like that, right? And the short passes, I think the players who have done the best in the short passing department have been Dani Olmo and Rafinha. But I still think there's an option of improving on the cutbacks as a goal scoring opportunity in this setup that Flick has.
We talked about this in the first video where you have the left side, which is more the distribution area, where you get these crosses. Rafinha kind of goes wide and crosses in. Balde goes wide, crosses in. Where the right side is more of an inversion and playmaking area because you have Lamine who will start wide, but he will mostly cross from these angles or the inverted areas in the half spaces. Same for Kunde, who can be the wide outlet. Now, he's not very efficient at it, but he can be out wide and cross. Sometimes it works, as we saw in the previous game, but he's also more of a player who will stay a bit deeper and in the half space. So different areas, different tasks. Again, we circle back to Flick's clarity, and that's right there.
And this one is the final one, which is on through passes. Consistently throughout the season, we've seen the efficacy of that central middle channel that we have created and the number of goals that we have created because of overloads in that zone and the quick interplay that happens. But then you come across a side like Getafe, and then they block that central part very effectively and through incredible discipline is what I would say. And then we saw Barcelona struggle. The thing is, what Getafe did, teams will be watching, especially in the Champions League and other places. We saw this in Monaco as well, right? They did nullify that middle part. So there will be games in which we won't be able to do this. And how we manage to tackle that, how we bring that into this concept of how what Dom talked about, sustained pressure, how can we incorporate the antidote to that? I think that would help us a lot because there will be more opponents who are watching the games that Barca are playing. They've just played 7. There are easily 31 more in the league, and there are some others in Champions League and other places. But they'll be watching, and a lot of them will come up with innovative ideas to stop that. Dom, any closing thoughts before we bid adieu?
I think that's pretty much sums it up. You have a high number of these through passes in the middle area of the pitch and then going into the final third because of that sustained pressure, because you need your verticality, you need the quickness when you have opposition pinned. That tempo control is crucial. You can't be slow. You can't be laborious on the ball when you want that momentum to keep going and your death ball needs to keep rolling, so to speak. So this kind of represents exactly that.
So here, hopefully, this is the second part of the series, as Dom rightly pointed out, and there'll be one more after this. And that, I think, will give us a holistic view into how Flick is coaching this team and what we can expect of them in the near future. That said, it was wonderful to do this. We also learn a lot in the process. Please follow us on our blog, on our YouTube channel. We have recently started a TikTok. If you can give us a follow there, that'll be awesome. All your support is very appreciated. And thank you so much for being there. Keep watching, stay safe, and as always, Visca el Barça.